So, the example, the first farm that we purchased, and I'm going to bring Tim up here in a minute, just to sort of show what we've done. 63 acres in Saratoga County. Tim's going to do a draft horse-powered vegetable CSA. One of the things that I actually really liked when I was working with Tim is that he had a very thoughtful business plan where he said, I'm not going to jump straight into it and try and do everything at once. I'm going to build and scale, learn my property, and from an investment perspective, putting on my investor hat, I was like, that makes a lot of sense. Don't dump all your money in right away and hope for the best. Build it, learn, scale, and so that was initially, I think, something that it was a question mark, but the more I talked to Tim and got to know his reasonings and why, I'm like, that makes complete sense. So, it's going to be a fun time next year. I know he's only going to grow on, 2 acres? Yeah, 2 acres next season, and I think there's about 30 tillable acres. So, you can see it's going to be a slow and scaled progression, but it's smart and allows him to scale his business over time. And we're right now looking for the conservation easement. We just were awarded funding from the county, so that's really exciting. And we'll be applying for state funding for that. And the state funding is the big piece, but we have already had a third-party donor give us some money. We have the county funding. We think we're really in a good position to get some state funding, put the conservation easement, make it more affordable. As soon as we do that, as we're taking money out, we can lower the rent for Tim immediately. It lowers his future purchase price, so just really a win-win, and we're excited about that. So that's, I know, a lot to cover. I'm sure you have questions, and so we're going to move, after Tim's done, into Bates Hall, and we'll do a Q&A there once you get settled, once you have a refreshment, and allow you to ask some questions and learn more on things that I didn't cover or you want to hear more about. Great. Thanks, Tim.
The farm at sunset. Well, I'll just narrate as we go through. No, thank you very much for inviting me to be able to talk tonight, Kevin and Local Farms Fund and Slow Money New York City, and everyone who's been involved. I am really excited to be in the position to be here and to talk about the property that we're on, and that I was able to, after years of shuffling my horses around, to find somewhere that I could bring one of my draft horses that I work with to do the production on the farm. So I was able to bring them back with me, which is exciting for me and my wife to be on what we hope is going to be our home and farm. One hope in talking a little bit about some of my background, how I got into farming, what the farming skill building process was, and the farm search, as well as what's happened now with Local Farms Fund, is that it's, I think, an example that you can find at least some representation, often I think a lot of representation, to what a lot of other farmers are experiencing as they try to learn these intergenerational kinds of skills that are farming, or that is farming, and to try and do that at the same time as they're trying to get into a really capital-intensive business, get into, find land they can have secure access to, start a business, be successful, do it in a way that they feel is in line with their social values, their ecological values, all those things. So hopefully you can also see some connections there to what others might be going through. And I guess, I don't technically, I think, fall into the USDA category of young farmer anymore. I'm 36, but if you'll give me some leeway, because I think it's 35 and under, it would be good for my psyche. So like a lot of new farmers, I didn't come from an agricultural background. I grew up in St. Louis until I was about 11, and then my mother and my brother and I, we moved up to Saratoga Springs, New York. And so I lived in Saratoga Springs, which is where I consider to be my hometown. But I always loved being outdoors, the little what turns out to be 100 yards of woods in a suburban area, and with a sewer drain that goes through it, that's the river and all that. That was the space where I spent all my time outside playing. My mother is an English teacher, and she loves nothing more than reading books and correcting grammar. And so I'd be like, let's go outside and play. And she'd be like, all right, 5 minutes. And we'd get to 5 minutes, she'd be like, I'm done. And I'd be like, I can't believe she didn't have more fun. I was sure she would have so much fun. She'd want to stay outside and climb the tree and do that. So I spent all my time outside being physical. After I got out of college, I immediately, like so many people that go to liberal arts school, I immediately went and did nothing related to my degree. And I used to joke that I was going to laminate my degree and put it on a surfboard and get paid to jump off cliffs, which coincidentally I did. I found a job in Hawaii where I got one-way tickets with some friends. We moved to Hawaii. I found work. We were sleeping on the beaches, doing what we could, and found work at this botanical garden. So I was giving tours in this botanical gardens, and they had a cliff diving show, which if you want to talk about cliff diving after this, I know we're talking about farming here, but I'd love to, because that's pretty fun too. And so I was doing that. I was working as a naturalist. I did some naturalist work there in Louisiana for a while, some trail work and habitat management back in New York, and I loved all that, but I was like, I really want to do something where I feel like I can steward land, I can be involved in plant life cycles and work with animals, and also maybe teach or work with people in some way, but also be producing something that's earning my income that feels tangible and needed. And I was like, I wonder what that could be. And I was just thinking, I was like, maybe farming. And so I went and took a job at Philly's Bridge Farm, which is in the Hudson Valley, mid-Hudson Valley, right outside of New Paltz. And I was an apprentice. I was doing education and farming there, and I loved it. It was hands down, I was like, this is it. I love this. I want to do this forever if I can. And so I went from there and I did the apprenticeship, internship, employee, and management model from 2006 through until fairly recently. I really kind of dug into it up at Essex Farm, where I started working in 2009. I worked there for 3 years, managing and kind of learning the ropes on this really full-year comprehensive farm where we had dairy cows, we were doing raw milk and making hay and growing grains and doing vegetables and working with the draft horses and the tractors and doing maple syrup. And it's super full-time. You're there 60, 70, 80 hours a week. So in my third year there, I was like, I'm going to go to part-time, which was about 35, 40 hours. And I started trying to look for land. And that was my first foray, like really seriously into visiting with, 20, 30 property owners, lots of phone calls, emails, meeting with agricultural professionals, any land trust, Cornell Cooperative Extension. This is the kind of stuff that a lot of people are doing. You're trying to find anybody who can network you to potential properties, a lot of word of mouth, chasing down a thread that leads to a landowner that maybe or maybe doesn't work. And it's a lot of work when you're also, really busy. And as Kevin mentioned, there's often not a lot of income coming your way. So you're really looking for a special situation that can take the skills you've been trying to build and the work you really believe in and feel that you can accomplish and try and find a situation that could work. So I was doing that at Essex Farm for about a year in my last year there, and it wasn't really panning out. And so a friend of mine had started a farm in Central New York where I was able to, that's my wife with my horses. I'm excited to see her on the farm with my horses. It's wonderful. I know I'm not narrating, but it's right there. So I was working at Essex Farm, trying to figure out what I was going to do for that next year, because I really wanted to either find a place or maybe get into an even higher level management position. And a friend had started a farm sort of similarly, and he needed somebody to manage the vegetables as well as the horses. So I moved my horses and the equipment I had started to accumulate to Central New York and worked there for 2 years managing vegetables and horse systems, and again, kind of building up the skills, doing the crop plans and the seed orders, and managing the greenhouses and the fields, crews, and all that stuff, as well as the horses and the horse work. And did that for a couple of years. All the while I was looking for land, and it was tough. I was a couple hours away from where I was trying to look for land in the Saratoga area. You're working a lot. Often when it's the busiest time of year, spring through fall / winter too, you're really busy, and it was hard to get enough time in a place where I knew I wanted to find land to catch those word of mouth opportunities and be there. You could get intensive spurts. I'd go home for a weekend and visit with 3 or 4 property owners who I had accumulated contacts from over weeks prior to that, and it just didn't feel like it was working. So what I did at that time was, I'd also had some sobering realizations. I had gone to get my pre-qualification with some lenders with my farm management income, which you've probably seen some of those sort of the articles in like the New York Times or things like The Dirty Secret of Sustainable Farming and things like that. And it is tough. You really, you're not making a lot of money. And so often with $8,000, $10,000, $12,000 a year income, you might be surprised, but they didn't think I qualified for very much in terms of being able to get onto property. So I was like, okay, I know that I have to find this really unique situation. I have to spend time searching for someone who I can work with that will allow me the opportunity to take these skills and put them into action and get this business started. I also felt, since I was, like I said, living further away and trying to find land somewhere, I was like, I think strategically it'll be a good idea for me to move back to my hometown and to live there for a while, get off farm work, and look for land at the same time and try and get the business going over a couple of years once I got settled there. It was really good fortune on my end that I was able to get work with American Farmland Trust, as was mentioned at the beginning, and because they're actually based out of Saratoga Springs. I was in the process of relocating there. I had a good fit for a job that had just, a position that had just opened. So I think, I feel really fortunate to have that position. I hope and think that American Farmland Trust, it feels fortunate too, and we were able to work together, and I do a lot of work with them on some farmland access projects here throughout the Hudson Valley. And so I was able to take this work in the town that I wanted to be in, that was in line with what I really wanted to do, and also be where I wanted to be, and really knuckled down for about a year and a half, business planning, running financial numbers, trying to learn that whole side of the farm business a little bit deeper. I had been doing it on the functional end for a long time, but I really wanted to dig into it and get more serious about it, try to apply some off-farm income towards lending, towards maybe more traditional lenders, or maybe the more traditional find a farm, like realtor market kind of opportunities, which was still, even with my wife's income, my income, it was still pretty limited what we could find in the area where we thought there was going to be a really good market, good soils, good opportunities for what the business we wanted to run and to grow. And so it was during that time that I ended up getting to meet with Kevin and Steve, and I had looked at a couple of different opportunities. There's a few different investor groups that were working in the area, and I was excited to sort of see, okay, there's maybe multiple paths that I could pursue here. What's going to be the right fit for me? I can say that some decisions were sort of made for me. There were some groups that said, well, you're not farming anymore. We're really prioritizing working with people who are currently farming. So even though I made what felt like a really good strategic decision to get some extra income and be in the place I wanted to be and transition into it, it just ruled me out for those groups. So I said, okay. Other groups had a different model in mind. They were trying to buy bigger acreages and then find farmers to do a different sort of lease arrangement with, maybe more collaborative, and which is really important and great. It just wasn't exactly, they weren't operating in the area that I wanted to be. So slowly kind of worked down to figuring, I was talking with Kevin a whole lot, talking with a few others, and said, you've taken this incredible amount of time with me on the phone. I mean, we spent so many hours through phone conversations, emails, meetings, explaining how this process would work, running through the numbers, looking at how these percentages, what they would mean if we put in some realistic figures from the farms we were looking at in the areas we were looking, so that I could take the time and say, okay, he's not only taken all this time to show me and explain to me how this works, but also to be able to say, hey, here's some of the numbers. This is, from my perspective, felt like a cost of doing business. I could say, can I work with this or not? Because in some cases, some of the groups felt to me a little bit more black box-ish, where I didn't fully understand how it might work. Whereas here I could look at numbers laid out, and we could explain how the process worked and why it worked the way it did. There was times where I might say that percentage seems hard here. What could we do? And if there was any flexibility, I always felt like there was flexibility given, and if there wasn't, there was always a clear reason why the numbers had to stay where they were. So from my perspective, I felt like I'm getting a really transparent partner. I'm getting somebody I can work with where I understand these numbers, and it allows me to say, does that work for me or not? Which was really important because it's a huge decision from my perspective to get into this arrangement. But we identified a property that was really almost the perfect fit for what I was looking to do. It's just outside of Saratoga Springs by about 25 minutes. It's about 63 acres, about 30 are tillable. There's also habitat. There's really good forest, wetland, some ponds, something that was really important to me. There was a livable house. It's in good shape. It's an old house. It's got old house stuff, but it's been maintained. And for me, that was really important because I have a lot of friends who are farming who have, at the same time as they're starting their business, they are literally building their houses or trying to maintain houses that are falling apart. And they are so smart and so hardworking and so talented. It's incredible what they do. It wasn't something I felt like I didn't have the skill set to rebuild my house or build a house and buy the tools to do that or to learn that. And I felt like it was a smarter investment on my part to wait long enough to find the right property that fit the suite of things I thought I needed to get my business started. I was fortunate to have gotten advice from a farmer along the way who had said, listen, when I was your age, I needed to be farming 3 years ago. But if, looking back at it now, 30 years later, if I had waited 3 more years to make sure I was in the perfect place, it would have been 3 years well spent. So it was hard to look at a property every time when I'm looking at like 50-something properties over those 5 years I looked for land. Every time that it was possible, I was like, maybe I should just do it. You know, maybe this will be the best opportunity I get. And his counsel was really important to me to say, wait, because it's more important to get the one that's really going to work rather than to burn out or just have something that's really not a good investment for your business. So I held out, and I feel like this is this opportunity that I was really waiting for, and then I found Local Farms Fund. We were able to connect and move towards this property and to close on this property actually in May. So I've been there for just about half a year now, wrapping things up here because I know we're going to move over, and I'm not trying to stand between anybody and their hot sauce. But the business plan, the way it's kind of shaping up is I had planned to transition from my full-time off-farm work to being on the farm and getting the business going by 2017, if we could find it around the time that we did. So from when we got onto the property through this year, all of next year, it's a lot of prep work. So it's a lot of field preparations, cover cropping, trying to control for some weeds, trying to get the fertility up and some of the micronutrient levels and some of the other, sort of the considerations from a soil health perspective. Trying to do some building improvements and to get some infrastructure in place for wash station, coolers, greenhouses, irrigation systems, the basic things that we need to get the business going and ready. Starting to do some of the marketing work. So starting to reach out to that whole slew of people, because I grew up in the area, who've been like, oh man, when you get that farm, we're totally gonna be members. I'm like, so you remember what you said? So getting all that kind of stuff done and reaching out to them and starting to get that list going, getting the website going, just trying to get it all so that come 2017, I can try to have production really in place to try and get somewhere around 30 to 50 families onto the farm for that first year, for full year vegetables and eggs, draft horse powered. So they would come one day of the week all year long and pick up all their vegetables and eggs for the week. Eventually, I'd like to start incorporating some of the meat and other aspects from the farm systems that I've worked and managed for throughout the years, but to start off, I wanted this core business. So we're in the process of getting that going on this property right now. I think the last nugget that's really important to this whole thing is this farmland conservation process, which that's really where I've been doing a lot of hustle, a lot of work to try to call people, figure out all this complicated process of bringing partners together to find a way to conserve farmland, which does a few really big and important things. One, it would conserve the farmland so that it would be farmland forever. It couldn't be developed. So that's the most important. Two, from the perspective of a group like Local Farms Fund, it allows them to get back some of that principal that then they can reinvest into another farmer's opportunity, something like this. And three, from my really personal perspective, it does three super important things, which is it reduces my rent if we're able to reduce the value of that property and reduce the amount that Local Farms Fund has put into that property. It makes that more affordable to me on a month-to-month basis. The second is that because it's reduced the value of that property because you've removed the development rights from it and conserved it, it means it's a lot more likely that I would be able to purchase it in the future, because now it's at a manageable level for me to maybe get an FSA ownership loan on it or something along those lines. And then three, because my rent is down and I'm a lot more likely to be able to purchase it, I have more available capital that I'm incentivized to put into the property because I'm more likely to eventually get that back. So now I could start to, if we can conserve it, then I can make some more capital improvements on the property that are otherwise, as Kevin had mentioned, it can be a challenging thing to do, to sink money into something that is tenuous. And like any investment, it is tenuous. There's a lot of work that needs to go into this to make it work. So I think we found an opportunity here to make it work, and so I've jumped on it, and I'm really excited to be in this position and to have this home to get started. And I just wanted to mention that there are really so many other farmers right now they're so smart and hardworking and talented and driven and committed, and they're looking for an opportunity like this. And I hope that we're able to find more ways to get people who are like, we support this, and there's creative ways to put together investment money and philanthropic money and public funds and other things that can conserve farmland so that we're getting these benefits of farmland from wildlife and climate mitigation and all that stuff to the landscapes that we think are important, to good food in our communities that hopefully we can make more accessible to everybody. And so there's so much work to be done, but it's exciting to, at least when we have little reasons to celebrate. I'm certainly really excited to celebrate because this is exciting for me, but I think there's opportunities coming up and coming down the road. So that's I guess that's a quick 15-minute version of all that. So happy to stick around here or into the other room to talk more and get more into details, and or to follow up with it afterwards if something comes up after tonight. Okay, in the other room with the hot sauce. All right, thanks.